Hello there, welcome back to the Codex. So in my initial Kompressa Prime video, when Urali Prime first came out along with the Kompressa and the Daikyu, I kind of accidentally made it sound like the Kompressa Prime, or even the original Kompressa, was not able to kill enemies effectively. This is of course incorrect. It's not quite what I meant. What I was trying to say is that a lot of people weren't aware of the fact that the Kompressa is also very good at killing stuff, along with being potentially the best, at least single target primer in the game. So I just wanted to rectify that. I unlisted the initial video because this video is basically just going to be a direct replacement and better version of that original video. So if you're looking for that, it's no longer going to exist because I would, of course, rather have people watch this video where I will go over how it's both a very good damaging weapon and it is an excellent primer. So let's go ahead and go over that. We're going to start off with a couple damaging builds here. Two of what I think are probably the best ones. A somewhat normal build that a lot of you probably already thought of is just a classic Cascadia Flare heat proc stacking build. So this is a corrosive and heat setup, also with a viral included because the Kompressa has viral damage built in, which is very nice, especially for stacking up these heat procs. So this is a fairly normal build. The only difference is that unlike a lot of secondaries now, or just weapons in general in the game, we're going pure non-crit. The Kompressa Prime does have better crit stats, but I think I like just feeding purely into the status damage of the weapon because the crit stats still aren't super high, so you're probably going to get more value out of building this out. This is a crit version of the build, for example. This has a lot less status chance because we're using two of these mod slots for Gambit and Target Cracker, and you can see it still has less than 50% critical chance, so I prefer the non-crit version here. Now, one thing to note is that technically, since we're already getting 480% base damage from Cascadia Flare, which stacks up basically instantly on this weapon, you would actually get way more heat proc damage by replacing Hornet Strike with a primed Bane mod, primed Expel in this case. For example, Expel Corpus or Expel Grenier. Since these Bane mods, they double dip heat procs, so they're actually a 140% multiplicative increase, so these are actually more heat proc damage. If you want to do an absolute pure max possible damage build, that's what that would be. But Hornet Strike makes it a universal build, so you can just put this on. It's basically set it and forget it. Very easy to use. The Corrosive procs will, of course, strip off enemy armor, multiplying your heat damage by giving enemies less mitigation. The viral procs will do the same thing, multiply your damage. So let's go ahead and showcase how this performs. And you'll see the, like I said, flare stacks up like instantaneously. There we go, already 480%. Then you just need to get your few kills for your multi-shot from your galvanized multi-shot mod, of course. Now we're fully stacked and it does fantastic damage. And this is with no buffs, by the way. I don't even have Tenacious Bond active right now. I'm not critting very often anyway, but if I was, I'm not even benefiting from the extra Tenacious Bond crit because I don't currently have a companion weapon equipped. Speaking of which, I am currently benefiting from Reinforced Bond. So I do have an extra 60% fire rate on top of what the build has. So if you aren't using that, you'll shoot a little slower than I am right now. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, this build works totally fine. Absolutely shreds guys. And again, since it's not using a Bane mod in this version, you can just bring this anywhere in the game and it'll perform relatively the same. Now, a really fun build you can use with the Kompressa is a Cascadia Empowered setup. This arcane is not one that we typically use because it's not very good on most weapons because they simply don't proc status enough to make it better than just a normal base damage type of build. So what this does is on status effect, deals 750 damage matching the damage type of the status effect you inflicted. So if you proc a corrosive proc, for example, it'll deal an additional 750 flat corrosive damage, which is mitigated by armor and faction multipliers or weaknesses and whatnot. So this is incredibly good on the Kompressa, because the Kompressa is literally the best secondary in the game for this because it applies status so absurdly fast. On this version of the build, we have 133.2% status chance per projectile, and with Galvanized Diffusion stacked up, our average multi-shot is over 15. So let's round that down to about 15, for example. If you take 15 average shots and you multiply that by 1.33, that is basically 20 average status effects per trigger pull, except it's actually up to twice that high because since the way the Kompressa works is that the status chance is on direct bubble hit and then also on bubble detonation. If the bubble both hits the enemy and detonates on them, you can effectively get twice the status procs out of them. So that's up to more like 40 status procs per shot. So that is an insane amount of extra damage from Cascadia power. Now, it is only 750 base damage, or 750 damage of the matching type per hit. But when you have that many hits, let's say, for example, that out of those like 40-ish status effects, you can reliably say at least 20 of them are going to affect the enemy. If you take 25 times 750, then that's 18,750 damage. Now, viral procs will also multiply this, and we do have viral on this build, so that's another times 4.25. Now we're at 80,000 damage per trigger pull, and the only two things in the game, basically, that multiply Cascadia Empowered's damage is Bane multipliers and vulnerability multipliers. So if you do want to purely focus on the empowered portion of your damage, keep in mind that Hornet Strike doesn't actually matter for that. So if you want to beef this up again, you could replace Hornet Strike with, again, a Expel mod, Expel Roken, for example, and this would apply the times 1.55 to those empowered procs. So if we apply that, we're now at 123,000 damage. And of course, if you have any frame with some kind of vulnerability effect, like Ureli herself, for example, her sea snares would multiply that again by whatever your percent is. So you can stack this up quite a bit. I'll go ahead and show you what this is like with the Expel mod on to show you a more maxed out version of this, and you'll see it is quite effective at killing enemies. Very fun to use. Let's get us going here. And again, most of this damage is literally just from Empowered. We don't have any base damage on this, so our heat procs aren't doing a whole lot of damage. It's basically just our status effects multiplying the damage of Empowered. We have Corrosive and Viral on here, again, thanks to the Kompressa having Viral built in, so we're stripping away enemy armor, so they're mitigating less of those Empowered proc damage. We're multiplying the damage with Viral. We're also stripping armor with Heat, so that's another 50% armor strip. And then we're multiplying the Empowered procs with a Bane multiplier. Now, you could also use Roar. Keep in mind that Rhino's Roar does count as a faction multiplier, so let me resummon these guys. You could use this right here, and this will also, again, multiply those Empowered procs. You'll see it's now even stronger. Completely shredding these guys. Yeah, so the Kompressa does not have an issue killing enemies, as long as you just build it appropriately. And then, of course, we do have the classic primer setup for the Kompressa using secondary encumber, whole bunch of status chance, a whole spread of status types. We have magnetic might and accelerated isotope on here, so we're adding magnetic and radiation and corrosive and heat, and it has viral built in, plus encumber. So this is going to proc basically every status type in the game, as you'll see here in just a moment. Yeah, this guy's health bar has nearly, if we keep shooting, it's going to have three rows of status effects, because we're effectively putting every single status on the game on them, which is going to multiply the ever-living hell out of the damage of any weapon that's using Galvanized Aptitude as your primary, for example. Let's go ahead and throw on the Stalta here. One of my favorite weapons to use with a primer. This is my Stalta build. I do have a ribbon on, but the ribbon doesn't really matter. If you're priming like this, it does infinite damage anyway. So Galvanized Aptitude, especially on the Stalta, because it's one of the weapons that has multiplicative aptitude, is going to do an absurd amount of damage. Let's go ahead and showcase that after we get our Galvanized stacks going. Yeah, 1.1 million damage in one shot there. And again, this is a fully auto weapon that can fire this fast, for example, but a single shot could do 725,000 damage in a single shot of this fully automatic weapon. And if you want to see some crazy damage, if you use the alt fire here, 26 million damage. That can go into literally into the billions, depending on what kind of Warframe buffs you're using, for example. So priming with the Kompressa on something like a disruption mission, especially if you want to go to level cap or Void Cascade to kill those Thrax, very good weapon to juice up your primary damage. So yeah, this has been a hopefully much better video on the Kompressa, fully showcasing what it's able to do. It's very good at killing enemies, and it's a very good primer. Again, sorry to anybody who watched that first video if I accidentally implied that it's not good at killing stuff. That's obviously completely incorrect. It absolutely destroys, completely murders enemies. It's fantastic. There's a whole range of ways to use it. I didn't even mention some of the frames that you can buff it with. For example, throw it on Lavos with Valence Formation, add even more status effects with those forced status procs, or the new augment that Gyre got, forced electric procs. Anything in the game that buffs your fire rate or multi-shot or status chance, anything like that, you can make the empowered build that I showed even more humorous at applying its empowered proc damage to just absolutely murder enemies. So very good, great weapon, great primer, great all around. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.